Kyo is an ugly gooner who was on track to die as a lonely virgin. However, everything changes when he meets a busty demon princess who wants to devour his soul, so he decides to rizz her up to make her eat him entirely instead. It all starts when Kanan, the daughter of Archdevil Gluttony, realizes that food in the underworld no longer excites her. So she meets her gluttonous father and asks for permission to snack on human souls, which are way more delicious. Once Kanan touches down in the human world, she enrolls in school and disguises herself as a smoking hot student with extra large melons so she can prey on the souls of vulnerable Gen Zs. One afternoon, while everyone else heads home, Kanan stays back in the classroom, checking out whose soul will be her opening meal. She fires up her demonic eye scanner, then suddenly locks onto a ripe green soul that immediately makes her start drooling. That soul belongs to Kyo. And while he's walking home, he suddenly notices a dark cloud hovering above him and falls straight into a trance. The trance drags him right into the classroom where Kanan is already waiting. Kyo gets impressed to find a beauty with such melons, but what impresses him the most is that she tells him she has called him to devour him. Kanan then transforms into her demonic form, revealing herself as an archdevil. She then narrates how she will first peel his skin, and once his body gets all firm and juicy, she will enjoy his raw taste. However, our virgin protagonist completely misinterpreted Kanan's words, so he immediately fell to his knees and thanked her for rescuing him from dying as a cold virgin, leaving Kanan super confused. Kyo confesses that all his life his kinky fantasy had always been to get pounced on by a baddie with G-cups dressed in a devil costume.
Nice.
Upon hearing this, Kanan realizes that the dirty-minded simp has the whole thing twisted and thinks she's after him to smash. Still, she figures this is a golden opportunity to swipe his soul mid-hookup, but that plan instantly crumbles when she recalls she's also never been touched by a guy. As Kyo rips off his shirt, saying he is ready to get down to business, Kanan freaks out, insisting only people in love should do something that nasty. Desperate to get his pee-pee wet, Kyo blurts out that he loves her, and hearing those words hits Kanan hard like a freight train. Since all her life, no guy has ever told her that before. However, Kyo realizes he is coming on too strong, so he puts his shirt back on and apologizes for being too thirsty. Even though he'd love to get his cap licked, he proposes they slow down and try a date first, and Kanan shyly agrees to give it a shot. The following day, while Kanan checks if any souls are ripe to harvest, Kyo suddenly pops up like a pimple, scaring the life out of her. He insists that since they are now a couple, he wants them to be on a first-name basis as proof of their intimacy. Feeling confident, Kanan agrees and sees this as her chance to take charge of the relationship. However, when she tries saying Kyo's first name, she stumbles over her words, embarrassing herself and revealing she's actually too shy. When Kyo asks if saying his name embarrasses her, Kanan denies it and dares him to say her first name instead. Kyo immediately calls her by her first name, and this gives her a dopamine rush. Seeing her blush hard, he presumes she likes it, so he continues to call her by her first name, which tickles Kanan's thick, meaty flaps. As Kyo keeps assaulting her ears with her name, Kanan senses her inner faucet's about to leak, so she slaps him and bolts from the classroom. Heading down the stairs, she wonders why she suddenly feels butterflies in her tummy whenever she is around Kyo, and this leaves her confused. Later that day, Kyo meets her to apologize for making her uncomfortable. He explains that all he wants is to spend time with her, and then suggests they make their first time together unforgettable.
Yes! 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 Yes!
Kanan immediately thinks the naughty freak is talking about making their first hookup session memorable, and this makes her panic. She's grossed out that instead of a normal date like real couples do, the freak's first move is wanting to dive into her salty ocean, so she lashes out at him for being a creep and then runs off in embarrassment. After school that same day, Kanan camps at her usual window, eyeing and daydreaming about the day all the useless souls finally ripen so she can feast. But suddenly Kyo barges in, asking to walk home together, and his abrupt entrance startles Kanan into a spit take. She furiously asks why he suddenly wants to walk home with her, and Kyo says it's because he's her boyfriend. Just hearing that sends Kanan floating on cloud nine, so she agrees, though she's set on putting him in his place during the walk. However, on the walk home, the lover girl realizes that walking side by side with Kyo is making her heart race more than expected. When Kyo notices how tense and sweaty she is, he suspects she isn't feeling well, so he suggests they hold hands. But Kanan freaks out, as that's the last thing she wants, so instead of holding hands, they end up binding their wrists with rope while everyone stares at them like they're convicts. When they get to the park, Kyo expresses how excited he is being tied up like a dog with a hot chick, and then mentions there's something he's dying to do with her there. Kanan panics, thinking the desperate maniac wants to bone her right out in public, but to her shock, the shy virgin just buys a croquette and asks to share it. He explains that he has always dreamt of eating snacks with his girlfriend this way, but somehow Kanan realizes she is actually disappointed that was all he wanted. When she notices there's no sauce for the snack and brings it up, Kyo dives into a passionate rant about how croquettes without sauce is the second best thing after fresh-baked bread. Watching him geek out over food cracks Conan up, so she admits that even though he can act like a thirsty creep sometimes, he's also got a charming side. She then agrees to try it without the sauce, and the second she bites in, her taste buds explode with a new level of deliciousness, unlike anything she's had before. As she keeps eating, Kyo gushes about how adorable she looks while snacking, and the compliment sends Conan spinning into a blushing fit. Meanwhile, in the demon realm, Gluttony is stressed about the safety of his beloved daughter in the human realm, but he is too busy stuffing his face to actually check on her. So a hot-tanned maid with planetary bust named Ami walks in and volunteers to check on things in the human world for him. Back on Earth, Conan had infiltrated an ordinary human family to blend in perfectly without raising eyebrows. To the clueless family, Conan passes as their eldest daughter, having hypnotized them into believing it. However, the downside to the brainwashing magic is that it wears off after some time, so before leaving for school that morning, she makes sure to zap them with it again. As she steps out of the house, Conan reminds herself not to get distracted, and her only reason for being in the human world is to devour souls. However, she freaks out the moment she sees Kyo standing in front of her porch. When she asks how the heck he located her crib, Kyo explains that he got her home address from their homeroom teacher. Conan cannot believe the useless tramp of a teacher actually leaked her personal information. But while she is fuming about this, Kyo asks that they walk to school together. Conan agrees, but then she takes off running and asks him to keep up. Mid-sprint, she thinks about how embarrassed she will be if they both arrive at school together, so she decides to unleash her superior demonic speed to leave him in the dust. But she soon gasses out as she totally forgot that her stamina is similar to that of drunk DJ Khaled. When Kyo eventually catches up with her, he notices how worn out she is, so he gets her a bottle of water but asks her to save a bit for him. Upon hearing this, Conan freaks out, realizing that sharing a bottle with Kyo basically counts as an indirect kiss. So she frantically chugs the whole thing, squishes the bottle, and then tosses it into the trash bin to avoid that from happening. When they get to school, Conan suddenly runs into Ami and her bouncy weapons, but she quickly drags her away before her secret is exposed. Conan takes her to the disciplinary committee room, where she demands to know what she is doing in the human world. And while they are arguing, Kyo suddenly shows up, wanting to know who Ami is. Nervously, Conan reveals that Ami is her family's maid and has been her personal caretaker ever since she was little. While Ami is thrilled to be there, Conan hates it because Ami is a predatory succubus, and she fears that she might snatch Kyo away from her. So she immediately protects her man and warns him never to look at Ami's fat buns twice. But just then, Ami zeroes in on Kyo's ripe soul and gets hooked on it. So with sonic speed, she pounces on him and starts drooling to have a taste. But Conan possessively yanks her away from her man and warns her to back off. Still, Ami grabs Kyo by the shoulder and promises to let him drink from her milkies if he lets her sample his soul. But the dumb MC refuses, insisting he is a one-man, one-woman type of dude, and hearing this makes Conan turn beet red. A little later, Conan suddenly notices that the entire hallway is littered with unconscious students who look like sucked-up mangoes as a result of their life energy being drained. She immediately suspects Ami must be responsible, and when she follows the trail of bodies, it leads straight to the home economics room. When she arrives, she catches Ami trying to soul drain their homeroom teacher through a kiss, so she angrily confronts them for acting so freaky. After the teacher runs off in embarrassment, Conan angrily turns to Ami, demanding to know why there's a pile of bodies out in the corridor. Before Ami can explain, Conan yells that the school is her soul farm, and for months she has been dutifully nurturing the students for the right time to ravage their souls. But now she's livid that Ami got to snack on them before she even had her turn. Ami tells her it's because she is too slow, but Conan fires back that it's because Ami has no standards and can even devour a pig's soul. This leads to an intense argument between them, until Conan apologizes for calling Ami a garbage hoe with no standards. However, she still insists that Ami chill with soul-sucking the students, because every time she does, Conan has to erase their memories, so Ami promises not to touch the students. Conan then asks if she finds Kyo attractive, but Ami, trying not to poke the bear, playfully says it's a secret. Conan angrily demands to know, so Ami teases her for being jealous, but Conan denies it. Shortly afterward, Conan worries that Kyo might eventually start to catch feelings for Ami, since Ami is every simp's walking fantasy. So, to keep Ami away from her man, she ropes Kyo into helping with her disciplinary committee duties, and the simp jumps at the opportunity. While they're on duty, some random girl loaded with papers suddenly trips, so Kyo immediately dashes over to help her up. However, the instant the girl clocks his face, she gets rizzed up, and her underwear gets sticky. But Conan jealously steps in between them to call dibs on her tall hunk of meat. After the girl apologizes and shuffles off, Kanan shyly insists she's not jealous or anything, but moments later, another girl crashes into Kyo and catches the same Riz sickness. Somehow, Kyo keeps rizzying up every girl in school like some supernatural chick magnet, and it slowly drives Conan crazy. While she scolds him for rizzing up all the girls, Kyo suddenly gets a WhatsApp message from his childhood friend Nadeko, asking him to swing by her place so she can cook for him. When Kanan sees the message, her jealousy fully takes over, so she snatches his phone and warns him not to let any girl tame him with home cooking. Later after school, as they head home together, Kyo notices Conan is still fuming, but when he brings it up, she insists she's completely fine. However, halfway home, she suddenly stops, bumps her forehead against his chest, and quietly reminds him that they have a love contract, so he had better not go getting swept up by other girls. Kyo realizes she is jealous and notices how cute she is when she is jealous, so he compliments her and then gently pats her head like a kitten. This makes Conan flush red and go weak at the knees, but without either of them knowing, Ami is watching the whole thing unfold from the school rooftop. Seeing that lovesick glow on Conan's face, Ami realizes she's already way too deep in her feelings, and it quietly makes her want to cheer her on and hope she finds love. Over the weekend, Conan runs into Kyo and Nadeko having lunch at some dingy little restaurant, and her jealous mode fires up instantly. Clocking her reaction, Kyo wastes no time introducing Nadeko as his childhood friend, and Nadeko starts yapping non-stop about how close she and Kyo are, frustrating Conan even more. When Nadeko notices the hostile chill emanating from Conan, she panics and asks Kyo who she even is. Kyo tells her Conan is his babe, so Nadeko nervously scrambles to explain that she has zero intention of stealing her man. However, she only makes it worse by talking about their friendship and how close even their parents are. This pushes Kanan completely over the edge, so she furiously threatens to grind Nadeko into pieces and toss her to the pigs. Fearing for her life, Nadeko desperately begs Kyo to fix the situation, but the idiot is way too busy being mesmerized by Kanan's hot, angry face to care. After frantically thinking of how to salvage the situation, Nadeko then comes up with the brilliant idea of just pumping Kanan's ego up. So she starts glazing how cute Conan is and even calls her Kyo's wife. Hearing that melts Kanan's fury, and she starts blushing like a hopeless romantic. Later that night, Ami jokes about how badly she had wanted to see Kanan and Nadeko engage in a Mortal Kombat round over Kyo, but Kanan fires back that she isn't the one at fault here. It's Kyo who went ahead and cozied up to another girl right after locking in a love contract with her. Noticing how deep Kanan is already in her feelings, Ami wonders if it's even smart for her to play Romeo and Juliet with a human, since getting attached will only make eating his soul much harder in the end. Upon hearing this, Conan remembers that her mission was to devour his soul, not his lollipop. Still, she convinces herself that she's got Kyo right where she needs him, and it won't be long before he hands his soul over to her willingly. Ami then proposes they go on a date so Kyo can fall in love even more. Conan panics since she's never been on a date before, but once Ami reminds her that she's the archdemon's daughter, and a little date should be nothing, Conan gets fired up and ready to run it. The next day at school, she invites Kyo to a private talk, but when she tries to ask him out, she freezes and challenges him to a duel instead. Noticing the confusion on Kyo's face, she tries again to ask him out, but gets nervous and challenges him to a deathmatch. Frustrated at herself, she tries explaining that she wants them to do something alone outside, but since Kyo is too dense to understand what she means, she finally just blurts out that she wants to take him on a date. She warns him not to be late, then walks out of the room, but the second she steps outside, she nearly has a heart attack from embarrassment. On the day of the date, Kanan takes Kyo to the Sky Tower, a low-budget version of the Burj Khalifa, and Kyo is thrilled to enjoy such an experience as a broke boy in his early years. What the clueless dummy doesn't realize, though, is that Kanan had the whole venue mapped out in advance, so she can use his fear and love vibes to get his heart racing and make him fall madly in love with her. So she starts by asking Kyo to get closer to the window and try looking down just to scare him. But when she tries to take his hand, Kyo ignores her like a shapeless girl at the beach, which throws Conan off because the simp has never once ignored her before. When she tries a second time, he sidesteps her, and now Conan fully clocks that he is deliberately dodging her. She tries to figure out why he's going out of his way to avoid holding her hand, and guesses it's because he's scared she'll yank him too close to the edge. So she teases him for being a scared wimp who is afraid of heights. When Kyo denies being scared, she grabs his hand and starts pulling him toward the window. As Kyo fights to break free from her grip, Conan accidentally pulls his hand toward her enormous dairy factory. This causes her to freeze in embarrassment, and that's when she realizes her tips are fully exposed and she forgot to strap down her heavy hookers. Right then, Kyo finally comes clean that he'd been sneaking peeks at her pointed situation the whole time, and that's exactly why he'd been keeping his distance. He tries to apologize for not saying something sooner, but Conan gets completely swallowed by the embarrassment and breaks down in tears. After they leave the building, they sit outside to snack, but Conan still feels the weight of the embarrassment she had to endure. So to lift her spirits, Kyo offers to mouth feed her his snack, and even though she's way too flustered to go through with it, she lets him do it anyway. She then offers to mouth feed him back, and Kyo, like a jolly puppy, excitedly opens wide to receive her treat. but Kanan cheekily eats it herself just to flex her dominance in the relationship. Seeing her smile proudly, Kyo admits that he loves nothing more than seeing her smile, and would give anything to make her smile, and Kanan loses all her composure at the compliment. Embarrassed, she tries to look away, and as she inwardly crumbles, it hits her that she is genuinely falling in love with Kyo. Since love is completely uncharted territory for her, Kanan decides to give it time, and in the meantime, she puts devouring his soul on hold. Several weeks later, Ami kicks off her mission to help Kanan and Kyo's love blossom, and her first objective is to get them to kiss. While she's brainstorming how to pull it off, she catches Kanan and Kyo heading back to class after PE. Ami can already sense the chemistry between two people who desperately want to smash, which only strengthens her resolve to make it possible. When Kyo tries to tell Kanan how adorable she looks in her gym clothes, she snaps at him to quit it, leaving him totally lost. Kyo spirals and starts asking if he did something wrong and why she's backing away from him like he smells like a farm animal. When Kanan tries to explain, Kyo accuses her of using him for his body, but Kanan yells at him to stop spouting nonsense. She admits that she doesn't want him to come too close is because she is dripping with sweat. Even at that, the pathetic simp says he doesn't mind and wants to sniff her sweaty armpits. Grossed out by this, Kanan advises the unhygienic buffoon to seek therapy, but he continues to beg to have a taste of her disgusting sweat. As he creeps closer, Kanan tries to hold him off, but he argues that it doesn't bother him since it's the scent of the girl he's in love with. At the mention of this, Kanan finally caves and then tells him to go ahead. He immediately drops down and starts huffing her funky sweat like a crackhead, chasing a high. And while he's doing that, Kanan is internally losing her entire mind. This causes her to sweat even more and accidentally drop a towel, so Kyo then gives her his own disgusting towel drenched in his body fluid. The second Kanan takes a whiff, she finds his scent weirdly comforting until it hits her that she is just as much of a freak as he is. After changing into their uniforms, they walk to class together, but on the way Kanan picks up a strange voice whispering something about ear cleaning. When she turns, she spots Ami, who is trying her best not to be seen, silently whispering to her to get a head-on lap ear cleaning from her boyfriend. Even though she has no clue why, Kanan agrees to let Kyo clean her ears while she lays her head across his thighs. In her mind, it's just a power move to remind Kyo who runs this relationship, and it's only a matter of time before he surrenders completely. But the instant Kyo touches her ears, Kanan starts shaking like she's about to combust, since her ears are one of her most sensitive spots. When Kyo starts scooping out her earwax, Kanan shuts her mouth closed not to scream happy noises, and also restrains her floodgate from bursting. Meanwhile, Ami is watching from outside, and is desperately praying they skip past ear cleaning and get straight to the main event. However, she is disappointed when Kanan suddenly rushes out of the room when she can no longer control the freakiness. Since this plan failed, Ami decides to activate Plan B, so later that day, she invites Kanan to chill with her in the inflatable pool. She had also invited Kyo for a casual visit, and when he arrives, he sees Ami's big, sweaty racks in her swimsuit and loses his senses. Ami then advises Kanan to also put on her swimsuit so she can make guys go gaga, but Kanan refuses, insisting that she isn't some naughty hoe. However, when she notices her man going crazy over Ami's show-stopping curves, she gets overwhelmed by jealousy and immediately strips to her swimsuit. Kyo also goes off the deep end, seeing Kanan's smoking body in a swimsuit, which secretly thrills her even as she pretends not to care. While the girls splash around in the pool, Kyo watches them like a starving dog at a buffet, but Kanan catches his unhinged stare and it makes her skin crawl. So she smacks him and tells him to get out of her sight. Kyo agrees to leave, but first he burns the image her naked jiggle pillows into his memory bank to goon later. As he stands to leave, he accidentally steps on Kanan's peach juice and ends up crashing into the pool, with his cultured face buried inside Kanan's wet spooch. She freaks out and angrily smacks him again. But as she storms out of the pool, she also steps on the same guilty juice and ends up landing nicely on top of Kyo. Later that same day, Ami switches to Plan C, and this mission is to simply force Kanan and Kyo to make physical contact so they can eventually kiss. To kick off this mission, Ami entices a dog with treats to frighten Kanan and Kyo. As the hungry dog chases after them, Kyo immediately tries to defend his girl, but ends up getting his cheek mauled by the freaky dog. Since that mission flopped, Ami tries a string of other schemes to push Kanan and Kyo together, but every single one crashes in spectacular fashion. Her final desperate move was to drop a mattress on top of them to force some physical closeness. Kanan screams at her to stop, but Ami stomps the mattress repeatedly to force a cracking session. Kyo tries everything in his power not to fall onto Kanan, but when the weight becomes too much, he gives in, and they nearly kiss but somehow end up just bumping noses. Kanan completely loses it at how close their faces are, and from underneath the mattress, she furiously uses her demon horn to send Ami rocketing. A little while later, inside the disciplinary committee room, Ami finally pulls out her last resort. This time she tries to mess with Kanan's head by telling her she has zero appeal, explaining that she created multiple chances for Kyo to make a move, but he refused to touch her. Kanan refuses to accept that she has no appeal, so Ami immediately suggests they put it to the test. So a little while later, Kyo shows up at the disciplinary committee room, but he finds her sleeping carelessly with her fat plots exposed. Even though he wants nothing more than to spank that, the weak virgin rips his shirt and instead covers her up. While peeping through the window, Ami is disappointed and suspects Kyo must lack testosterone, while Kanan, who is pretending to be asleep, is equally disappointed, having expected him to sniff her wetties. Determined to prove that no man alive can resist her charm, Kanan starts cycling through provocative positions one after another, but Kyo launches into a workout to wrestle his urges back under control.
Gay!
Just when Kanan is starting to sadly wonder if she has the allure of a wet mop stick, Kyo pokes her cheek and immediately sprints out of the room before she can open her eyes. Just then, Ami leaves her hiding spot and enters the room. Complaining about Kyo being a useless virgin who couldn't demolish a free cake offered to him, Kanan is sitting there glowing red, because the simple fact that Kyo even poked her cheek is all the proof she needs that her feminine charm is very much alive. The following day in class, the teacher introduces a new transfer student, a girl with milk jugs bigger than Pluto named Jeanne. But the instant Jeanne clocks Kyo, she gets excited and starts approaching him, until she trips and crashes in front of him. When Kyo moves to help her up, the crazy girl snatches his hands and swears on her life to shield him from the forces of evil. Shortly afterwards, Kyo takes her to the infirmary to get her head examined, just in case the fall affected her brain. There, Jeanne formally introduces herself as a messenger of God, who dropped down from heaven with a single purpose to keep Kyo's innocent soul safe. After the examination, the nonchalant nurse concludes that Jeanne is suffering from a severe case of delusion, and tells Kyo to just roll with it. Jeanne then meets Kyo, revealing that she needs to grant him a blessing that will protect him from the devil. Before Kyo can say a word, the nutcase pounces on him, insisting that he needs a drop of her saliva for the protection. As Kyo tries resisting getting her saliva juice on his face, Kanan, who happens to be passing by the infirmary, overhears his scream. Immediately, she barges in only to find a busty mommy in a shab-boinking position with her man. Furious, she whips out a pair of scissors and threatens to snip Kyo in the balls for cheating, but Kyo buries his face in her soft balloons, pleading that he is the one being victimized here. But while this is going on, they notice that Jeanne has completely passed out, and when the nurse investigates, she figures out that Jeanne is simply dying of starvation. So shortly after, Kanan and Kyo give her food, and Jeanne demolishes it like she hasn't eaten in weeks. However, while she eats, Kanan grows suspicious and quietly wonders if Jeanne might actually be an angel since she can feel divine energy pouring off her. When she can't hold in the questions anymore, she demands to know who Jeanne is and why she's throwing herself at her man. Jeanne introduces herself as an angel sent to protect Kyo from the devil, and Kanan panics, realizing she was right. Jeanne then shoves Kyo's face into her massive milkers to deliver a holy blessing, but Kanan yanks her man and makes it crystal clear that Kyo belongs to her. Hearing this, Jeanne immediately clocks that Kanan is probably the demon she came down here to save Kyo from, and the photo ID she came with also backs it up. She panics and throws herself on top of Kyo to shield him, but Kanan drags him out from under her fat peaches and accuses her of being the real devil here for trying to seduce him. After school, Jeanne blocks Kanan and Kyo from leaving together, which leads to a heated argument between both girls. While Kyo stands there with no idea what's happening, Kyo tries to suggest they all just walk home together, but Jeanne shuts it down, vows to keep him safe, and bolts off dragging him by the hand. When Kanan notices their hands locked, she boils with fury since she had never even held Kyo's hand before and immediately chases after them. She nearly closes the gap on Jeanne, but out of nowhere she realizes they've completely vanished from her line of sight. When she spins around, she spots Jeanne wrestling to break free from her dress, which has snagged itself on a tree branch. Trying to help, Kanan gets close to yank the dress off the branch before it splits Janet's wet flaps, like Moses split the sea. But the hard-headed angel refuses to accept help from the devil, insists on handling it herself, but ends up ripping her dress and crashing hard onto the floor. The following day, Kanan ties up Kyo like a filthy slave, and together with Ami, they prepare to battle Jeanne if she tries to come close to Kyo. However, they wait for hours until school dismisses, and Jeanne still doesn't show up. Frustrated, Kanan and Ami track Jeanne down to her house, where they discover she lives worse than a street beggar. When they peek through the window, they catch Jeanne praying over some crusty old man and accepting snacks as her payment for the service. When they confront her about it, Jeanne explains that rather than keep starving herself, she chose to offer spiritual guidance to lost souls and somehow ended up with an entire lineup of them at her door. However, Kanan soon learns from two ugly thugs that the reason they all want Jeanne's prayer is because they get to rest their heads on her thick thighs. So Kanan angrily scoops all of them away with her pitchfork for being dirty-minded freaks hiding behind the excuse of being spiritually lost. Jeanne cries bitterly that her food supply is gone, but Kanan scolds her for encouraging criminals in the name of offering salvation. Kanan also says she's completely drained of energy to fight and tells Jeanne to just go back to heaven and stop being a problem. But Jeanne reveals that she can't return to heaven until she accomplishes her mission of protecting Kyo's soul. That's when Kanan finally opens up that, for now, she has no intention of sucking Kyo's soul. Curious, Jeanne asks why, but Kanan starts to stutter, so Ami jumps in to explain that the reason is simply because she wants Kyo to clean her dirty pipe. Confused, Kanan asks what that means. but Kanan starts stumbling over her words. So Ami pulls out a laptop to show Jean some nasty videos from corny sites to paint a clearer picture for Jean. After watching the steamy videos, Jean feels like every bit of her angelic purity has been contaminated by pure evil, and it breaks her so completely that she later bursts into tears. The following day after school, Kanan reaches out and grabs Kyo's hand so she can finally experience the same warmth from her man that Jean had swiped from her. This excites the lovesick simp, and they stroll home side by side holding hands like lovebirds. The next day, Jean shows up to school rocking a thirsty sailor uniform, and Kyo cannot take his cultured eyes off her thick assets. However, Kanan finds this disrespectful and angrily swears to show Kyo why she is the demonic queen of the underworld. So later that day in the library committee room, she taps into her true demonic power to put Kyo in his place and remind him who he belongs to. Suddenly, Kyo barges in, catching her off guard, and when he sees how cute she looks in the sailor outfit, he loses his mind and starts gushing over her. Embarrassed, Kanan yells at him to quit it, but suddenly they hear Jean's voice outside asking for their whereabouts. So she immediately grabs Kayo and hides inside a locker. When Jeannie arrives, she shows up with Nadeko, and they both realize there's no one in the club room. But Jean's gut tells her Kanan and Kayo are lurking somewhere in there, so she switches on her supernatural bloodhound instincts and starts sniffing the place out. Meanwhile, inside the locker, Kayo's brain overheats because having Kanan this close to him makes him want to explode his pants. Outside, Jean continues to track Kyo's scent until it leads her to the locker where they are, and she concludes they must be inside. However, as she moves to open the locker, Nadeko distracts her with food, and even after opening the locker, she closes it to check what Nadeko is showing her. Inside the locker, Kyo and Kanan sigh in relief that they didn't get caught. And after the heat dies down, Kyo asks Kanan why she decided to put on a sailor uniform, only to end up hiding it. Kanan nervously explains that it's because she would feel embarrassed if anyone else got to see it, but she did it anyway because she thought he might like it. Kyo admits he loves it and leans in to kiss her. However, just as their lips are about to touch, Kanan's phone vibrates since Nadeko is trying to call him from outside, and this leads to them crashing out of the locker. Jean and Nadeko freak out when they see them, and accuses them of trying to make a baby in there. The next morning, Kanan is still embarrassed by the locker disaster, and cannot muster the courage to look Kyo in the face. However, on her way out the door to school, she runs into Kayo, who casually proposes they walk to school together. Kanan agrees, so as they board a train, they are forced to stay close to each other since it's crowded. Being pressed this close turns Kanan into a blushing wreck, even though she can't figure out why considering she already sealed a love contract with Kyo. Feeling emotional, Kyo confesses that he'd love nothing more than to stay on the train with her and just go wherever the ride takes them. So, instead of going to school, they end up at the beach where Kanan has fun playing with the water while Kyo watches her. After she is done, she asks Kyo if he has any naughty plans up his sleeve for bringing her to the beach. But Kyo explains that he just wanted to do something they would both always remember. His response makes her suspect his intention is to pick up where they left off with the locker near kissing scene, and this makes her anxious. To make matters worse, Kyo asks her to come sit close to him, but she nervously claims she doesn't want to sit on the bare ground just to avoid the tension. But Kyo, determined to enjoy her soft plots, scoops her onto his lap like a princess, and this makes Kanan's face erupt red like a volcano. She thinks he is about to kiss her like last time, and prepares herself for the lip balm, but the virgin idiot pulls out his phone to take a pic, leaving her fuming that she got all psyched over nothing. Meanwhile, Ami loses track of Kanan and Kyo since she was banking on witnessing some action go down between them. However, while she is busy trying to find their location, she spots Jian sniffing like a dog and also trying to locate Kayo using his scent. So she lures the foodie with snacks and asks for her help to track down Kanan and Kyo. At first, Jian refuses to help the devil, but when Ami flashes more snacks in her line of sight, the glutton folds like a cheap lawn chair and agrees to help. At the same time, Kyo and Kanan visit an internet cafe so that Kanan can dry off, and he also buys her a new outfit to change into. As Kanan is about to change into the outfit, she warns Kyo not to try peeping at her butter-smooth body, and he promises on his honor as a gentleman that he has absolutely zero creepy intentions. But to make sure he doesn't, Kanan slaps a blindfold on him, and while she strips, Kyo tries his hardest to control his intrusive thoughts from turning him into a peeping degenerate. In his head, he imagines all the nasty positions he could put Kanan in while she is changing, and just this thought nearly drives him mad. Once Kanan is done changing, she asks him to take off the blindfold, and when Kyo does, she angrily complains about the stripper uniform he bought for her. But Kyo excitedly compliments how amazing she looks. Meanwhile, Jean and Ami finally track down Kanan and Kyo to the cafe where they are. But Jeannie gets completely sidetracked by the ice cream selection, and while Ami is busy going off on her for losing focus, Kanan and Kyo slip right out of the cafe behind their backs. After making it out of the cafe, Kanan spots a Ferris wheel in the distance and says she would love to ride it. As they get into one of the carriages, she demands an explanation for why Kyo had them ditch school just to wander around random spots all day. Kyo shyly explains it's because while they were on the train, he noticed how tense she was, so he cooked up the spontaneous trip to help her relax. Kanan is touched by this, so she admits she actually had a great time and tells him she hopes he keeps pulling surprises like this on her. Hearing this excites Kyo, so he starts jumping around the carriage like a hyper brat on Sugar Rush, which causes Kanan to lose her footing and land her backside directly onto his lap. As they both awkwardly stare at each other, Ami and Jean show up behind them inside another carriage. Ami loudly encourages Kanan to seize the moment and jump her man's bones already. But Kanan goes full tomato red with embarrassment and instead just settles in beside Kyo and rests her head on his shoulder for the rest of the ride. Several weeks later, Kyo and Nadeko beg Kanan to help them with their studies for the final exams. At first, Kanan shoots them down claiming she's too busy, but Kyo desperately begs her to reconsider because the last thing he wants is to bomb the exam and spend his entire summer in supplementary classes. Seeing the desperation on their faces, Kanan freaks out and then agrees to tutor them. However, before she starts the lesson, she dresses like a hot teacher whose plan is to seduce her students, and this makes Nadeko start catching forbidden feelings for her. As they commence the lesson, Kyo confesses that his math skills are as terrible as your backshots, so Kanan scolds him for being a failure at maths. She then instructs them to pull out their textbooks, and once they obey, she starts loading them up with practice problems. When Kyo complains that he doesn't know how to, Kanan yells at him to use his smooth brain for once, and just watching Kanan scold Kyo gives Nadeko some form of freaky excitement. She wants to be scolded too, since that will make her climax, but Kanan instead compliments how good her problem-solving skills are, making her fume in anger. She clocks that Kanan keeps ripping into Kyo for having the memory span of a goldfish and fumbling every single answer. So Nadeko hatches a plan and deliberately gets her next answer wrong. But to her absolute horror, Kanan simply points out the mistake and cheerfully tells her to keep pushing. This makes Nadeko pout in anger, and as she watches Kanan continue to demolish Kyo, the crazy girl gets jealous and wishes she could also enjoy similar brutal treatment. Later that night, Kanan's brainwashed Earth Mom picks up a call from the underworld. It's Archdevil Gluttony calling to check in on his daughter and introducing himself as her papa. The clueless woman has no idea what's going on and misunderstands it. So while Kanan is busy in the bathroom drying her hair, she meets her there and informs her that a dude called claiming to be her papa. She then accuses her of dating sugar daddies, then runs off in disappointment, leaving Kanan confused. The next day at school, Kyo manages to pass his final exams and he is thrilled about it. He starts yapping about how excited he is that he gets to enjoy the summer break and how much fun he plans on having. Kanan gets so irritated by this that she snaps a dog collar around his neck and starts grinding her head into his chest like some brat throwing a tantrum. Kyo has no clue what is happening, and when he asks if she's lost her mind, Ami steps in to explain that Kanan is already feeling the loneliness creeping in and just wants to spend summer break by his side. She also reveals that Kanan has been summoned back to the underworld for the summer break, and the second Kyo hears that, he lights up and immediately volunteers to tag along. Kanan and Ami both freeze in shock, but Ami notices Kanan entertaining the idea and immediately cuts in to remind her that any human who sets foot in the underworld will either get skinned alive or blended into a smoothie. Kanan realizes she has a point, and while Ami is fully confident she's about to shut Kyo down, Kanan instead tells him to beg if he actually wants to come. Kyo quickly begs that he wants to come, so Kanan agrees. The following day, they all visit the mall to shop for clothes, and the last thing remaining on the list is to get swimsuits. Kyo freezes at the mention of swimsuits, so Ami explains that in the underworld, the only place hospitable to humans is the lake. Jana announces she wants in on the trip too, but Kanan shuts her down immediately, and when she asks why she's even here, Jana proudly declares she goes wherever Kyo goes. Right then, Nadeko shows up, and once they reach the swimsuit section, Ami pitches a challenge where they all pick suits and see who wears it the best. Kyo is all for it. Once the challenge is underway, all the girls scatter to different corners of the section to hunt down their best pick, and by the time they're done, it's time for the big reveal. First up is Ami, who picks a white bikini to complement her tan skin, and Kyo wishes he had lotion in hand for a quick goon session. Next is Nadeko, who picks a slave bikini, and Kyo wonders when his childhood friend completely turned into a psycho. Jean follows and is dressed in a pig-style bikini. And lastly is Kanan, who is too shy to reveal herself. She's spiraling over her swimsuit choice and is convinced everyone is going to cringe at it. However, when she finally reveals herself, Kyo screams that he finds it really cute and declares her the winner of the competition. He calls her the cutest girl in the world, and this instantly brings back her proud confidence. Later that night, they all board the Devil Express heading for the underworld. And as the journey begins, all the girls somehow realize they all have to pee. But Kanan finds it embarrassing to announce that she needs to pee in the presence of Kyo, so she decides to instead hold it in. Ami, on the other hand, doesn't want to leave Kyo's side even for a moment, so she'd rather let her bladder explode instead of going to the bathroom. As for Jane, she notices that the girls are tensed and don't want to pee, and even though she is also in the same boat, she'd rather stay put to enjoy watching Kanan and Ami fool themselves. When Ami can't hold it in any longer, she stands to use the bathroom, but Kanan refuses to let her go first. Ami reluctantly drops back into her seat, and after several agonizing hours, Kyo decides to cut the tension and offers everyone coffee. He hypes it up as the greatest coffee known to man because he poured his whole soul into it, and not wanting to hurt his feelings, the girls all take a sip. This only makes everything worse, and right when Conan is convinced her bladder is milliseconds from detonating, Kyo gets up to use the bathroom himself. Clocking this as their chance, the girls all rush behind him to use the bathroom too, only to end up tumbling over each other. A few hours later, they arrive in the underworld, and Kyo is stunned to see that his girlfriend's crib looks like a haunted house from The Conjuring. Jean, on the other hand, assumes they must have landed in some creepy corner of Japan, but Kanan explains to the dumb angel that she is in the underworld, and that makes her twitch with fear. The second they walk through the doors of the demon castle, they get greeted by over 1,000 maids, and the luxury has both Kaio and Jane's jaws on the floor. While Conan heads off to speak with her father one-on-one, Kaio loudly announces that he needs to urgently empty his bladder, so Conan points him toward the nearest bathroom. After Kyo is done massaging his sausage, he realizes he is lost and can no longer retrace his steps. Out of nowhere, a mamacita with a chest made of basketballs appears and asks if he needs help. Kyo replies that he does, but as he approaches her, she gets scared of his crooked face and tries to hide from him. She starts screaming that there's a creep on the premises, and Kyo, clueless that he is the creep in question, tries to jump to her defense. But suddenly he gets booted from behind by a pint-sized version of Conan, who immediately accuses him of making their mother cry. Another purple-haired pipsqueak also shows up to comfort the busty mommy, and that's when Kaio learns that their mother is suffering from a rare case of manophobia, which means she cannot stand being in the presence of any man. When the girls discover that he is a human, the pink-haired demon Barbie excitedly calls him a piggy and starts flirting with him. However, they soon realize that Kyo must be the human Conan brought, and the pink-haired girl writes him off as one of the pigs Conan keeps at her little ranch. When Kyo asks who they are, the pink-haired girl introduces herself as Milchi, Conan's little sister, while the purple-haired girl is Mil, Conan's other sister, and the busty lady is Conan's mom, Lilim. Meanwhile, Conan meets her father in the throne room to tell him about the lover she brought with her. However, after breaking the news and expecting her father to completely flip out, her dad throws her off by saying he is excited. Her mom and sisters also show up to congratulate her for bringing home a lover, and then the mom excitedly drags Jean out, saying she is proud that Kanan is into girls rather than disgusting guys. Confused, Conan asks everyone to chill and then clarifies that her lover is Kyo, the human boy. They are all shocked by the revelation, so Conan nervously explains that she formed a love contract with Kyo. Her family is still completely disgusted by this, and right on cue, the headmaid walks in carrying the special dish for the evening. When the cover gets lifted, Kanan is horrified to find her man lying there with no clothes and posing like a Gucci model in a photo shoot. She freaks out and demands to know why he let them strip him, and Kyo explains that he genuinely thought it was just their local dress code. When Kyo spots Conan's dad, he boldly introduces himself as her man, and his boldness rizzes Kanan up. But the dad declares that he will never in his life allow a human to be with his daughter. He explains that he can't just allow some broke boy from Brooklyn to snatch his precious daughter and start breaking her back. However, he gives Kanan a stamp rally and tells her that the only way he will allow her to date her human toy is if she convinces all 4 family members and gets their stamp of approval. Conan tries to protest the injustice, but Kyo stops her and urges her to accept the condition, since he still needs her family's blessing before he can bend her over. They start by asking Milchi for her approval, but the ugly midget tells them to screw themselves. They then try seeking Miel's approval, but she also refuses. Not giving up, they meet Lilim to get her approval, but Lilim's manophobia activates, making her hide from Kyo. Kyo then hatches a plan to disguise himself as a maid so he can get close enough to actually talk to Lilim, but the whole scheme collapses the second Lilim clocks his hairy legs. Just then, Kanan remembers that her mom is only scared of men who have gone through puberty, so she gives Kaio an age-reducing elixir and asks him to drink it. Once Kaio gulps it down, he magically transforms into Boss Baby, and for a brief moment, Lilim is able to cuddle him with her enormous pillows. However, the wholesome moment dies the instant the elixir wears off, and Kaio snaps right back to his normal self. Shortly after, Lilim agrees to cook dinner with Kanyan and Kyo, but makes it very clear that Kyo must stay at least 6 feet away from her at all times. Kyo doesn't sweat it though, and is fully locked in on getting a taste of Kanan's mom's cooking. Watching him beam with excitement, Kanan decides to jump in and help her mom cook so she can show her boyfriend a glimpse of her wifely potential. But since she has never cooked anything worth eating in her life, she makes a total mess of herself at first until Lilim eventually walks her through it. When they finish baking the cake, Lilim suggests they put the finishing touches on, and Kanan reluctantly agrees. So they form a love hand sign over the cake to infuse it with some romance, and Kyo completely melts over how adorable they look together and showers them with compliments. The compliment hits different for Lilim, since no man outside her glutton husband has called her cute in millions of years, and she starts blushing like a love-stricken teen. Just then, the Gremlin sisters show up wanting to have a taste of the cake, but from the way Conan reacts, they realize that she actually wants Kyo to be the first to have a bite. Even though Conan embarrassingly tries to deny it, Milchi gives her a plate of cake and asks her to hand-feed her boo. Nervously, Conan agrees, but as she tries to hand-feed Kyo, Milchi swoops in and steals the bite clean. This sends Kanan into a full rage, so Milchi offers to make it up by hand-feeding Kyo herself. However, this only makes matters worse when the shorty starts teasing Kyo about an indirect kiss. and Kanan completely loses her mind. The following day, Lilim meets Kyo dressed in a yukata to inform him of the test of courage they're about to go through. Soon, Kanan also shows up in a yukata, and Kyo goes crazy just at the sight of how cute she is. However, this makes Lilim bitter because she was hoping her daughter's boyfriend would also throw her a compliment too. On the walk to the courage test, Kanan thanks her mom for finally warming up to Kyo's presence despite her manophobia. Out of curiosity, Kyo asks Lilim why she can't stand being around men, and Kanan reveals that it all comes down to the fact that her mother is the most gorgeous trap queen in the entire underworld. Lilim explains that because of this, every desperate simp in the underworld was gunning to bag her, but their thirst only freaked her out and birthed her manophobia. However, she points out that Beelzebub was the one alpha who never treated her like a prize to be won, and actually stood as her shield, and that's exactly why she fell for him. When they finally arrive at the location for the test of courage, Kanan claims she isn't scared of ghosts, but Lilim knows she is. Kanan doesn't know, though, that Lilim cooked up this whole thing so that while Kyo is busy shielding Kanan from ghosts, she can deploy her busty arsenal to seduce him, and if he can resist, she'll stamp their relationship approved. She launches the operation by faking a hair adjustment, so Kyo can get an unobstructed view of her gorgeous nape. The instant Kyo's eyes land on it, his brain melts down and he blurts out that her nape is criminally cute. That simp response only hardens Lilim's determination, and she moves straight to the next phase. She then plays the I'm so hot card and starts bouncing her melons around, and Kyo nearly evaporates on the spot. But Kanan immediately starts twerking hers as a countermove, and Kyo snaps his attention straight to her instead. This makes Lilim slump in defeat that Kyo managed to shut out her weapons of mass distraction. But suddenly her yukata comes off, and her juicy jugs are on full display. Kyo almost loses his mind at the sight, and Lilim panics, thinking he is about to fondle them, but Kyo instead rushes straight to pet the cat behind her. This leaves Lilim completely frustrated, and since Kyo has bulldozed through every single one of her traps, she decides to hand him the pass. But suddenly, a tiny menace shows up from out of nowhere and starts accusing Lilim of rejecting her papa's marriage proposal and still having the guts to invade his turf. Lilim clocks that the screaming little brat is the daughter of the tentacled monster that used to chase her back in the day, and the gremlin announces herself as Kodagon. Even though Lilim apologizes for trespassing into their haunted lands, Kodagon refuses her apology and attacks her as payback for breaking her father's heart. But Kyo launches himself into the crossfire to cover Lilim and gets immediately snagged up in Kodagon's tentacles. Kyo loudly declares that Noon is laying a hand on his girl and her mom because they are both precious to him, and hearing him call her precious sends Lilim into a full Riz spiral. Then Kodagon yanks Lilim into her tentacles right alongside Kyo, but watching her mom tangled up in a freaky situation with her man ignites a fire in Kanan. So she furiously unleashes the electric power stored in her horns and fries Kodagon into a crispy offering. Once the chaos settles, Kyo takes off his shirt and Lilim immediately panics, convinced he's about to make a move. But the innocent virgin simply drapes it over her to cover up her exposed temptation. He explains that having her bazongas on full display was way too much stimulation for him to handle, and flashes a grin, and that grin hits Lilim because it mirrors exactly how her husband looked when he was young. Later that night, after they all make it back from the courage test, the girls unwind in a relaxing open-air bath. Meanwhile, Kyo gets exiled to the male bath, but out of nowhere, Lilim shows up offering to scrub his back. Kyo panics and tries to make a break for it before he does something he'll regret with his future mother-in-law, but Lilim seizes his hand and plants him down so she can get to work. While she's at it, she thanks him for stepping up to protect her earlier, and then reveals that she's ready to greenlight his relationship with her daughter. Kyo lights up at this, but Lilim apologizes that she can't offer him a taste of the honeypot because she's a married woman. She does, however, promise to embrace him like a son-in-law and then tackles him, insisting she needs to handle the front side too. Kyo fights back, and right in the middle of their scuffle, Kanan explodes through the door and rips her man straight out of her thirsty mother's grip. She then scolds her mom for getting freaky with her boyfriend, so Lilim apologizes and passes Kanan the soap to take over washing Kyo herself. Kanan's nerves go haywire just thinking about soaping Kyo's thick meat, but refusing to punk out, she decides to push through with it. But the second she catches a glimpse of his rising Jenga tower, she gets an instant nosebleed and passes out at the sight. Hours later, when she wakes, she finds Kyo sleeping beside her on her bed and freaks out. After pacing around nervously, she decides to lie beside him and realizes it isn't that bad after all, but when she rolls over, she catches Kyo wide awake staring back at her and loses it all over again. Kyo bounces up, buzzing with excitement when he realizes he's in Kanan's bedroom, but then the dizziness hits him like a truck, and he face plants straight onto her juicy thighs. Even though having his head parked on her lap has Kanan's nerves completely fried, she lets him stay knowing full well how drained he must be, and softly runs her hand over his head. She then apologizes for all the craziness that's gone down since they arrived at her place and says all she really wanted was for them to have a good time together. But Kyo tells her honestly that he's genuinely been having a blast. This gives Kanan instant red cheeks, and she moves closer like she wants to kiss him, but instead she sinks her vampire fangs into his neck as payback for drooling over her mother's curve like a certified simp. Several days later, the headmaid accuses Jean of the petty crime of stealing Kanan's underwear and, as punishment, announces that Jean will be publicly executed. Caught completely off guard by the accusation, Jean denies everything and tries to make it clear she is not a panty bandit, but the headmaid calls her a filthy liar and draws her sword to send her to the afterlife. Somehow, Jean manages to narrowly evade her sword strikes and continues to insist that she didn't touch Kanan's sweaty panties. But the headmaid dismisses her claims, explaining that the day before, when she went to the bathhouse to collect everyone's clothes, she realized only Kanan's plot garment was missing, and Jean was the only one still in the bathhouse. But while the whole argument is still going, Milchi appears and starts roasting Jean for being a pathetic little thief. But at that moment, Jean flashes back to that day in the bath and remembers spotting the tiny gremlin sneaking into the bathhouse while she was soaking. This makes her suspect that Milchi must be the culprit, but as she tries to confront her, Milchi takes to her heels, and when she finally has her cornered, she tries to take her down, but Milchi sidesteps her, making her crash her skull into the wall. Half of her body gets stuck with her baedonk exposed, and while she struggles to free herself from the wall, Milchi clowns her and then escapes. Just then, the headmaid, together with Kanan and Kyo, shows up, and upon seeing Jano's backside exposed, she decides to find out once and for all whether she's rocking Kanan's underwear or not. She yanks down Jano's shorts, and that's when she realizes Jano's peaches are fully free-ballin', and she isn't wearing a single stitch of underwear. This clears Jano's name and leaves everyone suspecting Milchi as the likely culprit behind Kanan's missing underwear. Kyo wonders why Milchi would even want to do something that nasty, and Kanan sadly guesses it must be because Milchi hates her. But her comment makes Kyo laugh, and seeing him laugh aggravates Kanan, so she boots him in the spine. And as payback for being cheeky, she dumps the job of hunting Milchi down squarely on him. While combing the castle for Milchi, Kyo spots her in the hallway, but the second he moves to grab her, she slips right past him like he's the world's most useless cop. As Kyo sprints after her, the moron goes barreling straight into the female changing room, and he gets hunted down by an armed mob. Trying to hide, Kyo ducks into a nearby fireplace where he accidentally yanks a lever and it shoots him directly into Milchi's secret room. She freaks out when she sees him, but as Kyo scans the room, he finds various Kanan merch and figurines, which leads him to conclude that Milchi is just some freak obsessed with her sister. When he confronts her with the hard truth, Michi freezes in shock as she realizes her deep secret has finally been exposed. Years back, when she was way little, Kanan had always showered her with big sisterly love. But as time passed, Kanan became busy with school and studies, and the time they shared together slowly dried up. Because of this, Milchi desperately craved her attention, and the only way she could grab it was by swiping Kanan's personal belongings and being an all-around menace. The harder Kanan furiously chased her down to get her stuff back, the more unhinged Milchi got, and the more she fed off the attention. Back in the present, Milchi tries to play it off like she isn't some deranged fangirl of Kanan. But once she sees that Kyo is completely sold on it, she folds and comes clean. She is convinced Kyo will start looking down on her like she's some obsessed maniac. But to her shock, Kyo admits that he finds her craft cool and then compliments her. Getting her craft recognized for the first time in her life hits Milchi somewhere deep, so she thanks him and begs him to keep his mouth shut. To ensure he does, she promises to do whatever he wants her to, so Kyo takes her to Kanan and encourages her to apologize and come clean about how she actually feels. When Milchi tries to, she gets nervous and fumbles, convinced Kanan is going to explode once she finds out about the stolen underwear. However, to her shock, Kanan gently pats her head, tells her that she forgives her, and then admits that she loves her. Touched by this, Milchi hugs her, and then confesses that the reason she had been acting all bratty is that she misses the attention she gets from her. But just as the whole thing is about to wrap up nicely, Milchi snaps right back into bratty mode since that's just been her factory setting for centuries. She calls Conan a gullible idiot for buying her sappy confession, but this time, Kanan has run out of patience with her spoiled nonsense and delivers a firm spank straight to her cakes. Shortly afterward, Kanan figures Kyo must have been the one who got Milchi to crack open, so she thanks him. After finally locking in Milchi's and Lilim's stamps, the only ones left are Miel and the dad, so Kanan suggests Kyo try bonding with Miel one-on-one. To pull that off, she cooks up the idea of all three of them hanging out at the lakeside together. Kyo is immediately on board, not because he cares about bonding with Miel, but because he is absolutely desperate to see Kanan's plumpies squeezed into a swimsuit. They hear a knock at the door. Miel walks in carrying snacks and tea she prepared specifically for Kanan, and as Kanan accepts them, she tries to rush Miel back out the door since the last thing she wants is for her to spot Kyo tucked under the bedsheet. But luck is not on her side as Miel decides to just plop down on the bed beside her for some quality sister bonding time. She asks Kanan what she sees in the human that made her fall madly in love with him, and Kanan freezes since she doesn't want to talk about such topics with Kyo hiding under the sheets. So to avoid looking like a simp, she tells Miel that it was simply because she entered into a contract with Kyo, not by choice. Kyo cries under the sheet when he hears this, and his tears get Kanan's fish all wet, making her twitch in embarrassment. Realizing how hurt Kyo must have been by hearing that, Kanan quickly adds that apart from the contract, she also enjoys spending time with Kyo. After this heartfelt conversation, Miel leaves, but when she gets to her room, she cries bitterly that Kanan has ditched her to go fall for some worthless lower life form. To cope with the pain, she transforms into Honey Bunny, her Twitch persona, which she uses to stream to her 100,000 plus followers. Emotionally wrecked emo girl streaming is Miel's dirty little secret hobby, and the last thing she wants is anyone under that roof finding out about it. But while she's mid-stream, Kyo suddenly crashes her live to invite her to spend the day at the lakeside with them. Miel freezes the instant she clocks him and angrily starts chasing him down with a giant axe to lop off his carrot for violating her space. She accuses him of not only snatching her beloved Kanan away, when she eventually catches up with him, she raises her axe to chop off his head, but luckily Kanan shows up and Miel quickly hides the weapon from her. Kanan extends the lakeside invite to her, and Miel agrees on the spot, but internally she's already cooking up a scheme to steal Kanan away from the dumb human once and for all. When they arrive at the lake, Miel launches her crazy plan to demonstrate to Kanan that she is a far superior partner than Kaio could ever be, but since she has absolutely zero idea how to pull it off, she consults the bootleg Google for guidance. The answer she gets back is to stimulate Kanan's pleasure centers because that is the guaranteed path to getting Kanan permanently hooked on her sauce. Taking the advice, Miel meets Kanan and offers to put sunscreen on her back. Kanan innocently agrees without a second thought, completely unaware that Miel is dead set on getting her strung out on her touch. Before starting the massage, Miel infuses the lotion with seductive mana to turn Kanan's knees to jelly, then zeroes in on every pleasure point guaranteed to have Kanan singing like a mermaid. After she finishes the plotful massage, she's fully convinced Kanan will never so much as glance at another man again, but Kanan just thanks her for working out the knots in her muscles. Slumping in frustration, Miel realizes that Kanan didn't even think much of the massage and just took it at complete face value. Just then, Kyo walks and compliments how cute Kanan's hairstyle is, and this makes Kanan blush hard to the extent that she absent-mindedly starts rubbing his chest to show how happy it makes her. However, when Miel sees this, it only adds to her frustration because that was the exact reaction she had been gunning to pull out of Kanan with the whole massage. Throughout the stay on the lakeside, Miel almost combusts out of jealousy seeing Kyo and Kanan be all lovey-dovey. It tears her apart seeing Kanan head over heels for someone that isn't her. But somewhere along the way, she starts noticing that the pain is somehow turning her on. She is surprised to find herself getting internally excited about the idea of Kanan being taken away from her. While she's deep in her spiral, Kanan approaches her and asks for her stamp. Even though Miel knows full well that stamping the paper means signing Kanan over to someone else, Miel goes ahead and does it anyway because the act of doing so gets her peaches wet. At that moment, Miel realizes she is truly nothing but a hopeless degenerate for having caught feelings for her sister. In a dream, Kanan finds herself at a ceremony celebrating the gathering of all 4 stamps from her family. Since this officially makes them a couple, she and Kyo decide to swap their V cards that night. As Kyo pins her down on the bed and prepares to unleash his deadly cobra, Kanan panics and screams at him to pump the brakes, insisting they still need to follow the proper procedure. She then jolts awake from the wet dream trembling, and when Kyo rushes over to check on her, she punches him into oblivion. Still in a daze, she asks about the stamp, and Kyo reminds her that only her father's stamp remains. Since they are supposed to leave for Japan the next day, Kyo suggests they get the old man's stamp as soon as possible. So, right after breakfast, Kyo tracks down Beelzebub and respectfully requests his stamp, but the marshmallow-headed man tells him he first needs to survive his trial before any stamp gets added. The trial is a volleyball showdown with Kanan and Kyo squaring off against Lilim, Miel, and Michiel as a substitute, with the headmaid locked in as the officiating referee. Now, when Kyo asks if Beelzebub isn't participating, the headmaid reveals that the donut head is too self-conscious to slip into a swimsuit because he's packing a tiny willy. So instead, he lays out the deal that if Kyo and Kanan can take down his busty wife and Miel, he'll go ahead and stamp the document. However, Michiel disagrees that only Kanan and Kaio get a prize for winning and insists they also want one. When Kanan asks the little menace what she wants, the devil incarnate grins and declares she wants a date with Kaio as her reward. Kanan completely loses it hearing this, but before she can protest, Lilim fires off the opening serve that detonates across Kanan's half of the court. That first shot has Kaio shaking in his boots like a total coward, but Kanan scolds him to lock in or they can kiss the stamp goodbye. No matter how hard Kyo tries to focus, he short-circuits every single time Lilim's show-stopping honkers come into view. As the match drags on, Kyo finds it physically impossible to look anywhere besides Lilim's volleyballs, and it's actively tanking their score. When Kanan scolds him for being a spineless simp with zero self-control, Kyo decides to redirect his attention to her assets and burn them into his brain so he stops losing the plot. Somehow, this strategy works and earns them their first strike of the match, which lands on Miel's face, knocking her out. With Miel eliminated, Milchi steps in, but on her very first attempt, she zones out completely and hands Kanan and Kyo their second point on a silver platter. After a grueling volleyball battle, Kanan and Kyo finally clinch the win, locking in the guarantee of her father's stamp. That night on the way to the hot bath, Kanan tenses up when it hits her that collecting all the stamps might actually lead to things getting physical between her and Kyo. So she nervously sprints ahead and tells him to hang back until after they've both showered because she has something to show him. Shortly after, Kyo steps into the male bath, only to find Beelzebub struggling to get something off his back. To his disbelief, Beelzebub tells him to help with his zipper, and that's the moment Kyo discovers that the intimidating, puffed-up dude he'd been terrified of this whole time is just some scrawny dude hiding inside a costume. While soaking in the bath together, Beelzebub admits he would never let a human lay eyes on his pathetic true form. But since Kyo managed to collect every single stamp, he's basically family at this point. But he tells Kyo that he and his daughter are simply playing pretend since their whole relationship is just a contract with nothing real behind it. Kyo pushes back trying to make his case, but that's the moment it hits him that Kanan has never once told him she loves him. Later that night, Kanan walks Kyo into a tunnel and reveals a breathtaking night sky bursting with vivid colors. Kyo lights up like a brat who just walked into a candy store at the sight of it, and they both settle down to soak it all in. Kyo then pulls out croquettes he made himself and brings up their very first date at the park where they shared croquettes together. Swept up in the nostalgia, Conan leans in to kiss him, but her father materializes out of thin air, explaining he can't just let them get cozy without dropping his stamp first. He then slaps the stamp onto the love document and warns Kyo that his balls will get deep fried if he ever even thinks about hurting his daughter. Excited, Kyo swears on his mama's thick cheeks that he will never shatter Kanan's heart and will ride for her until the end of time. Hearing him declare all of that in front of her father makes Conan want to disappear into the ground, but once she pulls herself together, she tells Kyo to work hard enough that she ends up telling him she loves him herself. Comment, Demon Baddie. If you watch this recap to the end, and if you enjoy anime recaps like this, subscribe to the channel and watch this next video.